All right. So Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tamassaka bi sunnatihi ila yawm ad-din. Amma ba'd, fa inna asdaq al-hadithi kitabullah wa khayrul hadi hadi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Beloved brothers and sisters, we commence in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. We send salutations of prayers and peace upon the finality of prophets and messengers, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, upon his family, his companions, and all who follow him in righteousness until the day of judgment. Today, alhamdulillah, we are pleased to have our sister Alia Boltakke. Hopefully I got it somewhat correct. For this, mashallah, wonderful program titled Thinking of Marrying a Foreign National, Religious, Legal, and Cultural Implications. To read a little bit about Sister Alia's background, attorney Alia Boltakke has always served her community with commitment and honesty. As an attorney, she has faithfully applied this model throughout her career. Alia was born in Brooklyn, New York, raised in an Egyptian household, and her mother is a convert. She is a proud Latina Muslim with her identity founded through many aspects of her upbringing, American, Arab, and Latino. Attorney Boltakke is dedicated to serving the immigrant and Muslim community. She provides services related to removal defense, asylum, family-based applications, business-based immigration, and has recently expanded into Sharia-based conflict resolution, mashallah, mediation and consulting for Muslim women going through divorce, specifically advising women and providing support to them regarding dealing with divorce, legal issues, and religious, cultural related issues of family interference and shame. She earned her Juris Doctorate degree at the University of UDC, David A. Clark School of Law. From her Fairfax Law Office, the Boltakke Law Group, PC, she represents clients throughout the United States and internationally. Attorney Boltakke is a member of the State Bar of Maryland, American Immigration Lawyers Association. She is also a pending member of the Federal District Court. In her personal time, Attorney Alia is a mother of 5 and a wife. She enjoys hobbies, including hiking, swimming, reading, and traveling to foreign countries. She fluently speaks 3 languages, mashallah: Spanish, Arabic, English, and now, mashallah, some Turkish as well, inshallah ta'ala. So alhamdulillah, barakallahu fiki, Allah reward you greatly, Sister Alia, for coming on and discussing with us and talking to us about this very important subject matter, inshallah ta'ala. And alhamdulillah, I thank you also because, mashallah, I always send her references, and mashallah, she always takes care of them for us as well. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Sister Alia. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much, Imam. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I know there are going to be people joining on little by little through the talk. SubhanAllah, Brother Imam Lebron has sent me, several people in the past. And it seems that this is an issue that's come up with me as well as within the Muslim community in general. And that, the Muslim community has expanded beyond, and in the United States, outside of the United States, into the international community. This wasn't really something that happened as much in the past, but now, with many of the international Muslim dating sites and Facebook and all of the technology that's connected us throughout the world, this has become an issue that's more prevalent within the Muslim community. And I'm not talking just about Muslim women, I'm talking about Muslim men as well, because and this is something that I've dealt with my clients, because, they're coming to me requesting that I help them and bringing their spouse to the United States. There's lots of positive stories that come out of that, but there's also a lot of negative stories that come out of that as well. And I think it's something that's really important for the community to know on both sides, women and men, what they're getting into when they decide to either immigrate to the United States or bring someone into the United States to marry and, hopefully live out their future with. So there are a lot of aspects to that many people are just not familiar with. So most of the questions that I get related to is, how do I bring, I'm interested in talking to somebody, I don't know how to get them here. And then how fast is that? I mean, the main questions that I get is, what do I do? And how quickly does it take? And and I will defer to Imam Lebron regarding some of the religious issues and some of the cultural issues as well. I mean, I do see that. So some of the issues that I see that my clients face is, even though perhaps they are from, a cultural background, right? It could be any type of other cultural background. It could be a Latino background, Desi background, Asian background, Arab background, any other type of background, right? But it doesn't mean that because you're from that background, you're necessarily going to have a common ground with a person that you're bringing to the United States, or that they're going to have a common ground with you. Sometimes we make assumptions, with people, but we forget that, especially if you've either lived in the United States for a significant amount of time, or you've been raised in the United States for a significant amount of time, that your culture is different. Even though you have been raised within that community, your innate, culture, the way that you interact with people outside of the home, all of those things are going to be different than the person that perhaps is coming into the United States. Just speaking from my background, I have background in this issue from clients, but I also have background in this issues personally, because I sponsored my husband. He wasn't a United States citizen, and I personally sponsored him. So in general, I've seen these issues personally from my family. My mom is a convert, and then she married into a family that was not American family. So she dealt with those issues as well. And, so seeing that growing up, seeing it as myself, having my husband be from a different country, and then also seeing what my clients deal with. So I don't know, brother Imam Lebron, what type of things do you tend to see, what people are coming to you with, as far as like issues when it's related to this type of issue, as far as bringing someone or sponsoring someone in the United States?
So for me personally, as an imam, we get this question comes up a lot, and then usually the bigger issues usually revolve around I want to marry this person who's from overseas, but usually my fears are that they've never met the person in person. They've only seen them, quote unquote, maybe through an app or something like Zoom, inshallah ta'ala. They haven't been able to meet their families. They really don't know what the intention is behind all of it. Is it a sincere intention that, yes, I'm really interested in you, or is it an intention that I'm interested in you because I know I can get to America and get a green card? So I'm always kind of stuck at a crossroads, right? When I deal with this issue, inshallah ta'ala, because of how do you kind of gauge all of those things? Alhamdulillah, just because we've seen many of the bad things, like you've mentioned, where people have been used. But then I have a lot of friends who, mashallah, are also married, interracially, and have either sponsored somebody or mashallah, been part of the process of bringing a husband or a wife over, like yourself, Sister Alia, and they got great marriages, have been married 20 years, 25 years, and the likes, inshallah ta'ala. So we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So really kind of, those starting there, like what advice you would give to someone who, is talking to somebody, especially from overseas, that they haven't been able to meet in person, inshallah ta'ala. Sometimes, another fear I have is that these people sometimes is like, okay, I can't come to the US to meet you, but how about you come overseas and meet me overseas? And now with the whole issue of women being taken, all right, to be sold as sex slaves and all this other stuff, all of that stuff kind of just jumps into my mind, and I always become very concerned with that stuff as well, inshallah. So I think maybe that's a good starting place for us, inshallah, meeting people who are not in the country, and then, how do you approach all of that and move forward with all of that? And, what are the, the complications that can kind of come out of that, and how can you kind of try to avoid some of that?
So what I will say is, at least from the side, as far as the legal side and immigration side, so there's two ways that a person could be brought into the United States. One way is through what's called a Fiance Visa. Okay, so a person, if they're not sure they want to marry someone and they want to meet them in person and, and stuff like that, and they're not really sure if they really want to marry them because they don't know the person well. And it's hard to know someone just through, an app. And especially of what, you've mentioned, Imam, that, you can't see who their family are, you can't know their community, you don't know their friends, and all of those things that sometimes it's harder to get to know a person. However, I mean, also just in the Muslim community in general, because we don't cohabitate, right? We don't cohabitate. You're really never going to know a person 100%. So I think, a lot of Muslim men and women already come into the process saying, well, we're not going to know them 100% until we live together. Okay, that's true. But there are ways that you can get to know a person without having to cohabitate with them and being next to them 24/7, right? But as far as the legal side in general, one thing that we have to say is you are required to have met the person in person. So in order to bring a person to the United States, whether that's through a fiance visa or the other option, which is through marriage, that person has to have met you, and you have to have met them, and you have to prove that you guys met each other. And specifically for a fiance visa, you have to have met each other at least 6 months, within 6 months of the application being filed, right? So that means that 6 months or less, you have to have met that person in person, in whatever capacity that is, you have to have met them. Otherwise, you're not allowed to sponsor them to the United States. As well as through, if you want to marry someone, there's no marriage by proxy. Because, I know that's something that's kind of people are doing, like, marrying online, and like, the sheikh is there and they're married, and then now they're married. But that doesn't work for immigration purposes at all. So you can't marry a person by proxy. I've heard of that, people doing that. It's happened. I've dealt with it in my practice, but it's related to issues as far as, for example, in Syria, there was the war there. So, a person may have wanted to bring a Syrian spouse, like a wife, specifically in a situation we had a wife. They wanted to bring her. They married by proxy through her uncle. Okay. But that doesn't really work for immigration purposes. So you have to request an exception, and it has to be an extreme exception, like whereas the person can't go there because there's war and she can't get out because of the war, or, in certain situations, maybe the person had gotten asylum and so they can't return to that home country and marry them. But, immigration is going to say, if they can't get out, go to a third country and marry them there, right? So they're always going to say, meet them first. You have to, if you can't, then you have to prove that 150% that you cannot meet that person, face to face and marry them. And you have to have really significant evidence and proof that you can't do that, because they really don't like to do that. And it's very rare that they'll approve it, except in exceptional circumstances. And even in those circumstances, it's going to make your application take a really long time to get approved, right? So, one of the main questions I get is, how long does the process take, right? So even if you are bringing a person here on a fiance visa, for example, which could take a little bit less, you're not getting married just yet. You want to see, how it turns out. I don't know if anybody ever watched 90 Day Fiance. It's actually kind of telling. It does talk about a lot of this legal stuff, and it also shows, I know it's a show, but it does really show a lot of the issues that could happen in different relationships, and it's really legitimate, a lot of the things that they show there. But what you do is you're supposed to meet the person, right? So of course that alone is going to take time, meeting a person face to face. And then you have to do the application process, which in of itself could take 8 months, right? So the entire process could take at least a year. So if you're the person that you're interested in does not have a other type of visa, like a visitor visa or some type of other visa, then it's going to be harder for them to come quickly. So you have to go through these processes, which is like the fiance visa. As far as the marriage-based visa, again, you guys are required to go meet in person, okay? Because one of the, it's very hard to tell, immigration on paper alone that this marriage is legitimate, right? So especially if a marriage is new, you're not going to have a lot of things together. You're going to have some communications that you've had. And especially if the person's from overseas, you're going to have a lot of issues, communications and things, things that you're going to try to present to immigration to prove that this marriage is real and legitimate. One of the ways that they confirm that a marriage is real is if it has been consummated. Well, how can they know that your marriage has been consummated? They're not going to know. I mean, they're not in your bedroom, right? The only way that they can kind of assume that the marriage is consummated is because you guys have spent time together, for example, in a hotel room. So if you guys both booked a hotel room or went on a honeymoon, then the assumption is the marriage was consummated during that time. And they make the assumption that that marriage is real and valid, because that's one of the reasons why they would say a marriage is real, is because it's been consummated. There's other things that we could talk about related to that, but I don't think it's a different topic that we could say related to that and what is considered a valid marriage. But black and white, a valid marriage is considered valid if the marriage has been consummated, especially if the person is overseas. Okay. Outside of that, you also look at, did you guys live together? Have you, cohabitated? There are some people who will go over to the home country and stay with their partner for a month or 2 months or 3 months. Well, that is also documentary evidence and proof that this marriage is legitimate. So when I have people asking me, well, how long does it take? And I'm giving them advice about, what they should do pre and post marriage, or pre and post, meeting someone. I tell them, I think that, because a lot of people think, oh, well, they're far away. How can I meet their family? How can I do this? Well, you can involve people, and the question that, Imam had presented about the fear that a woman is going to be, exposed to negative things or exploited. This happens for men and women. I will say, I've had instances where a man, the family, he married a woman, right? But they hid the fact that she had mental illness until after they were married. And then they also exploited him to work for them. So they brought him here, okay, had him come here as a husband, failed to mention to him that his wife had mental illness, okay, because in short blurts, she was okay, right? In short instances, she was fine, right? But when he started cohabitating with her, he realized that she had significant mental illness. And then they were forcing him to work to support the family. So it can go on both ends as far as negative things happening and people being exploited inside and outside of the United States, right? So the first thing that I tell people is make sure, okay, I know that perhaps there's a lot of converts that don't have a good family, dynamic, perhaps, mainly, perhaps maybe because they did convert and then their family's not supportive of that. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to involve people who care about you, right? Whether you're a man or a woman. So if you're a man, bring your friend with you. Ask, someone that that you trust, that is going to have your best interests at heart regarding the issue, right? I've had people that are, long-term family friends of mine ask me the same question. Do you think that this is a good situation? And I've said, hey, I don't know, this seems kind of weird, I'm not sure. And I've given my opinion. And I think that that's the best thing to do, is make sure you involve, because marriage is not just about you, it's also about your community. So involve your community in it. So if you're going to, if you're a male and you want to go visit a young woman or a lady, take your friend with you. If you're concerned about the country itself, try to see if there's a third country you guys both can go to see. But I prefer that the person actually go to the home country of the person, as long as it's safe, to see what their home life is like. What is their house like? What kind of lifestyle do they live? What are their parents like, right? All of those things are really, really important. The other thing is, if you are a woman and you have your parents, or you have a wali, or you have somebody who's willing to travel with you, your sibling, even if they're not Muslim, of course, they're going to have your best interests at heart. Take them with you, because you will be protected. I would never suggest for a woman to travel on her own to meet someone. I know that there's many countries that are safe and things are safe, travel is safe overall. But I think in general, to keep yourself protected, because you never know, is always have somebody go with you, right? Whether that is another woman. Of course, it would be preferable if you could have, a male companion, family member, or, someone from your family come with you and be there as a protector, because, a lot of times people are less willing to exploit someone if they know that they're protected, right? Whether that is, are they protected by their family as a whole, or whether they have a community behind them, they're less likely to exploit that person if they feel that they have some kind of backup, right? And that goes on both ways, okay? But I know that what comes into play a lot is the emotional thing. Oh, he loves me. He tells me I'm amazing. Every day he calls me and he says good morning. And I never got that before, or whatever, right? And the other thing too that because unfortunately, in the Muslim community, well, not unfortunately, but in the Muslim community, women can only marry Muslim men, right? And I will say, unfortunately, for this part, is that a lot of Muslim men in the United States are not necessarily marrying Muslim women. So the pool of Muslim men gets smaller and smaller because the Muslim men are not necessarily marrying Muslim women, which is not bad. I mean, you can marry whoever you want, but it's just decreasing the pool that's available, for example, in the United States, right? So then what happens? The women either just don't get married, right? Or they look towards polygamous relationships, which that's a whole nother aspect, right? Or they look outside the country, right? So then they have, especially, I would say for both sides, men and women, right? Because I've seen men, they've just been craving that attention, and they have this woman who's just all about them 24/7, but you forget
Babe,
that's
I'm
not
just joining.
valid. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. But so that's not necessarily reality, right? Because you're not going to have that person be 24/7 available for you as they are in a virtual world in real life, because they're not. You're going to be working, they're going to be working or going to school or trying to better themselves or have children or whatever. So that reality is not going to be the same. And I think sometimes people get shocked by that, because you're not available 24/7 as you make yourself available when you are trying to communicate and get to know this person. I mean, you're talking to them till 2 a.m. in the morning on the phone, right? I mean, you're not going to do that. When the person's living with you, you guys are married, you can be like, go to sleep. I can't talk to you till 2 a.m. Right? So, sometimes, people forget that it's kind of a honeymoon period. Right. But in general, I try to show everyone both sides. And I also try to be, positive as well. I'm not always giving the negative perspective. I also give the positive perspective, but I have to bring into play my experience, as what I've seen. And I let people know. Another issue that people forget is a lot of times, if you're bringing somebody, as a foreign national, or you're trying to come, you have to consider, do you want to have their whole family here, or do they want to bring, if you're a foreign national, do you want to bring your whole family? Because a lot of times the, understanding, or I'm not even saying an assumption, but the desire is for you to be close to your family, right? So the person's going to come here and they're going to be separated from everything and everybody that they know. So that's really hard in general, right? So you have to consider that. And they are also considering that. They're leaving everything. They're leaving their home, they're leaving their family, they're leaving their friends, they're leaving their whole structure of life. And that's also challenging. When they first come to the United States, they can't work. So whoever is sponsoring them has to support them. So you have to be able to support a person for several months before they're going to be eligible to get a work permit, right? If they're coming with the green card, then yes, they can automatically start working immediately. But if they're coming in on a Fiance Visa, or even if they were here on a visitor visa, for example, they're not going to be able to work for a long time. So you're going to have to be able to support them. And also, too, people think that it's super easy to get a job. That's not easy. You also have to think about those considerations. It's not easy to get a job. My husband had a master's in business, and he had a difficult time finding a job, when he was here. And I reached out to the Muslim community. Well, the Muslim community doesn't always, they don't really either have jobs or they're not really interested in helping, so that you don't expect that you're going to have this welcoming, committee to, when your partner comes here to the United States. They may need to learn more English. They may need to take English classes. They may need to take, enrichment classes or courses or school in order to make themselves eligible for the employment market. Okay. The other issue that I just touched on a little bit was family. Okay. That's a conversation that you guys need to have, because the person may want to bring their family. Okay. So especially in cultures where the family is very entrenched in each other, there's many, so there's a lot of cultures outside the United States. I mean, this is, outside of the United States, families are very intertwined, right? Children either live with their parents for a long time until they get married, or they support their family and their parents through retirement. Okay. That's not necessarily an American cultural thing. Okay. Even if you're raised within a culture that does that, it's still not 100% common. It's not like 100% of the time that we do that. But in many countries outside the United States, that is done. You are required to support your family member. Okay. So you have to consider, is that going to be an expectation of you, right? That, so let's say there's a woman that you're marrying, she's the only child. Do you think she's going to want to support her family? Of course she is. So she's going to want to be sending money home to her parents, or she's going to want to sponsor them to come and live with her when they get old. So who's going to be taking care of them? You are. So you have to consider, is that something that you want to do? Is that something that you want to take on? Because that's something you may have to do. And you don't want that to be a conflict when you guys later are in your later marriage and suddenly you have your kids and you have this and you have your house and you have whatever, and now you have to take care of her parents. That's going to become a huge conflict, right? So that is a conversation that you guys need to have from the beginning of whether you want to do that or not, right? And that goes also for women sponsoring a husband. If he's in the first son, most likely the expectation is that he is going to help support his parents. If he has a sister who is not married, the expectation is probably he's going to help support that sister who is not married because he is her wali. So you have to understand that. I personally have that situation. My husband asked me, he said, look, I have my mom, she's a widow. I have my sister, her father passed away. I have to take care of them. Is that okay with you? Are you okay if I want to bring my mom here to live with us? Is that okay with you? Are you okay with that? I was okay with that. I grew up that way. My grandmother lived with us. I was used to that. That was something I was okay with, but not everybody is okay with that, right? And you also have to understand there's a dynamic between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. Not every daughter-in-law and every mother-in-law is going to get together, especially if you're living together. You're not going to always get along 24/7. So, and that also goes for the husband and his in-laws. He may not get along with them all the time, but you have to understand that that's a possibility, that you may have to be the support for not only your wife and your children, but you may end up having to be the support for the remainder of the family. Okay, so I know that that's a topic that a lot of people don't think about when you're in the honeymoon phase. I love her, he loves me, blah, 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 right? You're not thinking about all of that other stuff. So that's something that you really do have to consider. And this is outside of the immigration part. The immigration part is a long process. Your partner is not going to be a citizen for, I would say, I know it says like you can become a citizen through marriage after 3 years, but that's not exactly the timeline. You're forgetting there's a year of bringing them here. Then there's another 2 years because you get a temporary visa, green card. Then you have to remove the conditions on that temporary green card. And then you have to apply for citizenship. It's like almost like a 5-year long process. Okay, before that person is a citizen. So Imam, I don't know if there's anything that I didn't touch, or there's another topic that you feel like is important to talk about.
What is the difference, inshallah ta'ala, or the exact difference between a fiance sponsorship and a marriage, coming through marriage?
Okay, so a fiance, so sponsorship through a fiance visa, the first step is that the person does have to meet them. So you do have to meet them in person. Then after you've met them in person, you submit the application. The way that it works through, administratively is, so, with the Department of Homeland Security, they have the department of, which is called USCIS, which is United States Citizenship and Custom Immigration Services. So USCIS, right? United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, they are the administrative branch of the Department of Homeland Security. So after you've met your person, you have all the documents, everything put together, you submit an application to that. They will either deny or approve that application, and that application directly will be sent to the embassy, and then the embassy is requesting some documents from them as well at that time. So the process is a little bit faster because it doesn't get stuck. So if you do a green card application, there's a three agencies that review the application. If you do a fiance visa, there's 2 agencies that review the application. However, a fiance visa, there is no law granting you the right to bring your fiance to the United States, right? There is no legal basis providing you support that you legally are allowed to bring this person. It is a something that's allowed if you submit the application, right? That is something that is allowed if it's discretionary, and so you can bring them, but there's no legal right to bring them. As opposed to a spouse, right? Husband or wife, you marry them and you have a legal right to family unity. So, under the Department of Homeland Security and immigration regulations, right? You have the right legally to have your husband or wife or child or parent with you here in the United States. That is a legal right that you have. And so if they try to deny it, you can fight it. Whereas for a fiance visa, if they deny it, you can either reapply or try to overcome the issues of what they had, that they said no, but you have no really legal right. There's no waivers to issues that they might have of inadmissibility. And so there's a lot of rules, as to whether how a person can come in or whether a person can come in, so if a person has a criminal history, if a person has history of violence in the past, if a person has any drug, convictions, or certain, serious felony type convictions, certain diseases. So there's a list of a lot of reasons why a person is not going to be allowed in the United States, right? That's not a bad thing, because if a person has a history of domestic violence, I don't think you want them to come be your partner. You know what I mean? Because maybe they didn't tell you about that, but they do a background check. So they're going to do a background check. And if the person has a history of violence or a history of criminal activity, then they're not going to be allowed in the United States, right? But there are some things that there's waivers, allowed for, for example, let's say there was a misunderstanding, in an application. So like I had one example that the system, there was a person, he divorced, he presented the divorce documents, but in the system, it wasn't showing that he was divorced, just because they were updating the system. And so when the United States government went to check, there was a problem. And so they said, okay, look, we think you lied. He didn't, but they said, well, you need a waiver. So he said, okay. And he applied for the waiver, and then he can come because it's her right to have her husband here. So he's eligible for a waiver for that misrepresentation, right? So there are certain reasons why a person could get a waiver. Like, for example, back in the day, HIV used to be a reason why people can't come in, the United States. Now you can, or you could have asked for a waiver for health reasons, and stuff like that. So there's different things, but usually those things are serious. And in general, there probably would be a red flag for me. Like if my partner didn't tell me that he'd been married to like 3 other ladies, do you know what I mean? Or something like that, then those are things that may come up and a reason why you might need to reevaluate the situation. But the main difference between a fiance visa and a marriage application is the legality, okay? And also too, when they come into the United States on a fiance visa, they have 90 days to marry you, okay? If you do not get married within those 90 days, or they do not marry you, then they have to return, and they promise to return back to their home country. One of the restrictions on that fiance visa is if they do not marry you, they can never adjust in the United States or marry anyone else, right? In the United States, they can't. They're barred from doing that. Or even if they marry another US citizen, they cannot adjust their status in the United States because they didn't marry the person that they promised that they were going to marry. And that is part of the rule. So sometimes if you're not sure about the person, maybe it would be good to do a fiance visa because you're not 100% sure about them. And so you might have them come, although you guys are not necessarily going to get married, maybe, at least you can get to know that person. But again, you have to realize you're going to be supporting that person while they're there. So if you're not going to be living together, obviously, because you're not married, you're going to need to find a place for them to live. You're going to have to start seeing them, getting to know them, introducing them to your family, getting your family input. And if after the 90 days, you guys feel like you're not compatible, that person has to return back to their home country. There's nothing else they can do. They can't change another status. They can't, and so if you're coming from outside of the United States, you also have to understand that, because if you decide to stay, you're illegal. You don't have a work permit. You don't have a way to adjust your status. The only way that you can adjust your status in the future is if your partner that brought you promises to support you financially. So they have to fill up this special form that's called the I-864, which is an affidavit of support saying that until you are a green card holder for X amount of time, they are willing to support you if need be, right? And that's the only way that you can get around it, is if your ex-fiance, okay, is willing to sign that form. And how many of them are going to do that? And, that's not really going to happen very often. So you have to understand that if you're coming here on a fiance visa, it's possible that you may not have any other way to adjust your status and you're going to have to leave.
Now, I have a question for you. In terms of that fiance visa, it seems to be almost the safest, route. In short, that gives you time to know that person. But often, I think what happens sometimes is that the people, they'll say, well, maybe a way around all of that, me not having to spend that extra money to get them their own apartment, is I go to the imam marries us in the masjid, and then, it legalizes us living together until we figure it all out. Is there any implications to all of that type of stuff?
Well, immigration wise, there isn't, as far as legally, because, with immigration, they do not recognize Islamic marriages as a marriage. The marriage has to be legally recognized. So that means even over, because I've had people all the time, they said, oh, well, we got, Islamically married, in their home country. Okay, is that considered a marriage? Because I've even had that as an issue with immigration. So an immigration officer found out that a couple was Islamically married, and they said, oh, you can't do a fiance visa. Oh, well, but you can, because that is not a legally recognized marriage. Okay, so as far as for immigration reasons, it's not a legally recognized marriage. But also too, it's, for me, and I think for any other Muslim, the real marriage is the Islamic marriage. If you guys are Islamically married, you're married, right? And so the only implication there is not legally, but it's the emotional part, right? So you're going to be opening up yourself to that and being less subjective, right? You're going to be less likely to see the negative situation, because especially in the first 3 months, that's the honeymoon period, right? After that is when it ends, and then you start seeing all the negatives of this person, right? So, I think in general, a person should give themselves time before they decide to do that, whether that's a month, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They should give themselves some time to figure out, is this the person that I really want to marry? And let your family and friends and people around you have input in that, decision. Ultimately, the decision is yours, but it doesn't hurt to have your family be involved, because then it's less likely that you're going to put yourself in a situation where you find that the person just married you for the papers. And there's a lot of people that are in it for the long haul. You know what I mean? Like, they're willing to wait 3 years to get their green card and then call it a day. You know, I had a client recently come to me and he said, I was married to my wife. You know, I knew there's some red flags. It just felt something weird, but now she has her permanent green card and she left and she just left. She got her permanent green card and she was out the door. Okay. After 3 years of marriage or 4 years of marriage. Right. And then he comes to find out she had been like talking to other guys during this whole time of marriage, trying to see who's the best guy that she could get to marry and give her a green card. Right. Like, so she was in it for the long haul. She was fine waiting those 4 years or whatever to get her green card. Okay. So you have to kind of, and that's why it's really important to look at those red flags. You know, most of my male clients who fall into it is because the woman is extremely beautiful, okay, or very young and they're older or whatever, and she's super catering and all those. They always fall into it, and then they're like, she left me, and I was like, you guys were not compatible, but you just were blinded. You had the whole, you know, the horse blinders. You have to, that's why you let your family get involved. They're going to be like, look, she's real, you know, are you sure you guys are compatible? You're 65 and she's 25, you know, she's, you know, I mean, I don't know, you know what I mean? So it happened. But the other thing is, you know, the women also fall for it too, because the guy is very, what they call love bombing, right? He love bombs her, constantly calling her, constantly saying, I want to be with you. You're my dream woman. You're the love of my life. And he continues to love bomb her until when one day his stuff is packed up and he's gone. Where did he go? I don't know where he went. He disappeared. Maybe you have a baby. He doesn't care. Do you know what I mean? It's happened many times, you know, because he just calls it casualty of the business, right? You know, he's taking it. He's fine to take advantage of the situation. He has a person who's caring for him, family, right? But he's biding his time because you weren't really the one he wanted. And that wasn't his goal. His goal was to get the green card. Whether you have a child involved, whether you have long-term commitment there, years, there's some people who are in it for the long haul. So you have to kind of think about those things. It's not always obvious, you know, it's not always obvious. But yes, but then there's also the other side where there's been some relationships that are worked out, you know. There's really good guys out there. And there's really good women out there who are truly looking for a real connection with somebody and not just the green card. And they just haven't found it in their home country. You know, my husband personally, he said, I would have never have gotten married in my home country. He said, it wasn't going to happen because the expectations for the men is so high. You know, you have to make this much money. You have to have a house and you have to have a car and you have to give her X amount of dowry and you have to, you know, and that happens in a lot of countries is the expectations for the men is very high, you know, when they're looking to get married. And I'm not saying that the expectations for Muslim women are less. It's just that, I mean, for Muslim women in America are less, but it's that a lot of, you know, the understanding in the United States is that we're working together as a team. You're not just the only person to, you know, only support me, although Islamically the husband's supposed to support you. But a lot of mentality that American women have is we are together. And so if me helping you helps me, then we are working together to build our family, and that's okay. But that's not the same mentality in other countries. You know, other countries, it's the expectation is that the man is supposed to do everything, but maybe he's not capable of doing that, you know, because of dynamics of the country, not because maybe they are not educated or they can't get a good job, but maybe the economy is really poor, or, you know, just the family that they're from is not the family that somebody else wants to be married, you know, their child to be married into. That also happens, you know, the whole societal caste system, right? I've had clients that have had that happen to them, you know, because they have issues. They may have married in their home country, but the wife's family said, you're from a lower, you know, caste or group from me, and I don't want you being married to my daughter, right? So the chances of them getting married is a lot less, just because of where, which group they were born into. So, and not everybody is out there just to get the green card. There are a lot of people who are out there to truly, really be married to someone they love and they care for. But you also have to look at red flags. The immigration looks at red flags. Okay. So there's a handbook that they have, and there's different things that they look at to see if a person is truly in a valid marriage. Okay. Well, the things they look at are age. Is the guy way older than the girl, or is the woman way older than the man? Okay. That happens a lot. There's a lot of like 20-year-old guys who are hitting up the 50-year-old woman. Right. I mean, okay, there are some men who are 22 years old and marrying, and they legitimately want to love them. But is that the norm? Is that like the standard? No. Right. It's not. So of course, immigration is going to look at that. Also too, they look at financially. Does one person make more money than the other? Is the man who's the immigrant extremely wealthy and the woman who's in the United States not? Okay, they're going to say, is he paying her to come to the United States? And that also goes vice versa. Like, for a woman, who's overseas, maybe she's wealthy and the husband and the guy's not. Education wise, they also look at education. Are they similar in education levels, right? He never graduated school and she's a PhD. There's a question there, right? Like they're going to ask. So you have to look at that compatibility in general, just even on paper. And that should be a question that you should ask yourself, because if you're a PhD and your wife never went to school ever, okay, that, unless that's what you want a woman who's not educated, maybe that's going to be a problem for you, because you're going to be trying to do educational, intellectual stuff, and she's never going to get it. Not saying that that's, bad, or that's something, you can help your wife get educated, but you also have to consider those things. A lot of times people don't think about that stuff. They think about how they look and they think about how they make them feel, and that's it. But that's not the only thing you should consider. And even Allah says that, that you should look at the person, where they come from, how they were raised, what type of situation they were raised in. I've had many people who've had difficulties in marriages because they're like, for example, there's a young woman. She was raised in a very wealthy family. Okay. She never had to clean. She never had to cook. She never had to do anything in the home. Her parents paid for everything for her. She had beautiful home, beautiful clothes, everything taken care of. Okay. And she comes to the United States and she has to cook. She has to clean. She has to work, and she's miserable. Right. And she didn't think about it. She just thought, I'm going to come to the United States. Everybody's so rich there, right? Maybe he makes a lot of money. Okay. He could be a doctor, an engineer, but you still got to clean your toilet. Do you know what I mean? Like in some other country that doesn't happen. You don't have to do that. So you have to consider that when you're looking at your spouse. Okay. And whether they're going to be compatible, because you're looking at those things. And then on top of it, you're adding the cultural stuff and the immigration stuff and all the other stuff that comes with that. And then you just have a big old fat problem and an unhappy person. Okay. So when I'm talking to my clients, I educate, I don't have to do that. I could say, yeah, give me your money. Let's get this paperwork rolling, let's do that. But I don't do that because I feel that it's my, not my job necessarily, but my duty as a person of, a citizen of the community to educate people and question them, because I don't want that to come back on me, that I caused this difficult situation of sadness and heartbreak because I didn't do my part and educate the person from the beginning. Because at the end of the day, what happens is it causes a lot of heartbreak. Maybe you don't have kids, but it affects you. I have many women who said, I'm never getting married again. Never. Because I did that situation. Even men, I don't care. I'm not getting married. And then what does that also bring eventually? It brings temptation. It opens the door to shaitan. There's women who said, I'm gonna marry a non-Muslim because they treat me better. He lets me practice my religion and he doesn't care what I do, and I'd rather do that. I've had many women say that because they're so sick of what they've dealt with in the Muslim community, and men as well. They say, you know what? She doesn't give me a hard time. She helps me. We work together. We don't have difficulties, right? And I'm just going to marry a non-Muslim because I don't have to deal with that garbage. So, or they decide not to get married again and just do zina. That also happens. And that's happening more and more in the Muslim community than ever before. Why? Swipe right or swipe, I don't even know. What is it? Swipe left, swipe right. Right? Like, the apps, it's easy. You have your app or whatever. I can have someone for tonight and I don't need anybody else for tomorrow. Right. So, and I think that those are the things that we have to consider. It's all mixed in together. It's not just, the marriage part, the legal part, the Islamic part. It's a mixture, and you have to look at every aspect of it when you're considering moving forward in a relationship.
So we have a couple of questions here, inshallah ta'ala.
Sure.
One of the questions, what are some red flags that can be spotted when one party may have the intention of receiving a green card, then just divorcing the sister or the brother, but presents an alternative intention until they can reach that goal or that point?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, so I would say this, one thing that is, for men and women both, is the whole children thing, right? Like, so if you're especially for women, when you're getting older, like, okay, well, I'm settled, I have my job, blah, blah, and I would like to have kids. And then the guy's like, no, I don't, we're not going to have any kids for like 5 years, right? Or whatever. And, I don't want to tell my parents because they'll be, that you're a convert. I don't think we should tell my parents that. Or if the one of the people has kids, don't tell my family that you have kids, right? That comes up. The lack of involvement of their family is also a red flag, but not always, because sometimes their family's all on board with it too, So, it's hard, but you will see it. There's things that the person says, there's things that they may do. There's a lack of commitment as far as the future goals and future plans, right? It's always in the moment. Let's see what's happening now, right? So the person doesn't talk about anything that they want for the future, or like goals, joint goals. They don't want to, it's harder initially, because of course everybody has the rose-colored glasses. Okay. But if the person's like, I think, we should have a marital, like if the marital contract is really weird, or they're trying to have all these weird stipulations in the marriage contract, or saying like, even sometimes some people put in the marriage contract that, you don't have any access to my property if we divorce. And this is like even the foreign national, because maybe he has some stuff and he doesn't want her to have access to it, right? Things like that. Like if you see that the person is not fully invested, there's something going on there, and that goes for the women and the man. If the woman's constantly talking about how much money you make, how much money, material things, constantly focusing on those things, like what are you going to give her? How, where is she going to live? What is her house going to look like? And not saying that those are things that are bad. Of course, a person wants to feel comfortable, but is that her only goal? That's all she's thinking about, and she's not really considering you and how your life is going to be built together. You should question those things. It's hard because everybody has a different perspective of what they feel is important in a relationship, but again, you have to look at compatibility. Is there compatibility here? Is it just one-sided? I'm so in love with this person, and that goes both ways, right? Of it being one-sided. because the foreign national also, because, you know, there are some people who are American citizens who have alternative reasoning for you to come. And it's happened, just as I mentioned before. They want a worker, you know, they want a guy to come here or a lady to come here and be their worker. I had a poor client, her husband brought her here to be his mom's servant. Okay, to be his sex slave and his mom's servant. And he forced her to have her mom support her, who didn't have a lot of money. Okay, her father had passed away. She let her mom support her. Anything that she needed financially, her mom had to give it to her. And she didn't have money. He didn't pay for one thing for her. Okay, so that it goes both ways. So if you're a foreign national and you find that this guy, he's been married 2-3 times, there's a flag there. Why has he been married 3 times? And his wife, you know, talk to his ex-wives. What the heck happened? Right? You know, I mean, I know that there's some situations that people are crazy. I get it, but there's a question there. Why is it, you know? And then he's so stuck to his mom. Why is he stuck to his mom? What's going on there? What's the dynamic there? You know, what are you getting yourself into? Right? And so this person lost the sense of who they were. They were smart, intelligent, you know, educated, really amazing person who became a shell of themselves because she put herself into this situation thinking she's coming to America and she's going to get a green card. And she has like this amazing situation with a husband who makes good money. And then what happened, it was completely different. So it can go both ways. It's not just like one-sided. I'm not saying as an American citizen, we have to be careful of everybody. It goes both ways, right? And so we have to look at the situation objectively, right? We have to be looking as if we were giving advice to somebody else before you make that decision for yourself, right?
And I think one thing I think I would add is just everything being a rush or fast paced. We want everything to be done right away.
Yeah.
Let's kind of get through it and get this done already. You know what I mean? Kind of, I always tell people slow down, take your time. You know, that can also be a red flag in Charlotte. They don't want things to come out.
I do agree with that. Like if the partner's like, let's get married tomorrow. Like you just talked to them yesterday and they're like, I already want to marry you. I love you. Yeah. Like I just met you. Like, dude, like just hold your horses. You know, I mean, yes, there's sometimes love at first sight or like, but you know, I mean, the thing is that's hard too, is because, you know, we're ingrained, you know, it's kind of ingrained in us of that. You're not supposed to date. You can't date. You can't, you know, but I'm not saying that getting to know somebody means that you're dating them or whatever, right? You are getting to know them in an Islamic way for the purposes of marrying that person. So if your intention in the communication with that person is for marriage, then that's okay. You need to get to know them. Allah says, get to know this person, you know, get to know, see if you guys are compatible, because your goal is to have this person for the rest of your life. Okay. I'm not saying that everything's going to be glorious all the time, because it's not. That's not marriage. Marriage is hard because you're compromising. You're having to make exceptions. You're having to change things about yourself. They're having to change things about themselves so that you can live a harmonious marriage, right? I'm not saying to be a completely different person. That's not what you're saying. You're saying that in order to create harmony, you both compromise, right? That's marriage, is compromise, okay? So you have to consider, is that something that you could do with this person? Communication, does the person, how good are their skills of communication and English? A lot of people forget that if the language, you know, that they speak as a second language, there's going to be communication problems, not because you cannot communicate or you guys don't understand each other. It's because of language, lack of language, that causes miscommunication and misunderstandings. That's also a big issue that a lot of people have. You know, like I've had clients in my office both speaking English and I'm like translating between them in English, right? Like, you know, because they don't understand each other, right? Just the communication skills. So, you know, I mean, but I've had couples that didn't speak English hardly, like the husband didn't speak the wife's language and the wife barely spoke English. Like they but they communicated and they were happy and they figured it out. And even the officer was like, how do you guys talk to each other? They were like, Google Translate, but they figured it out and they were happy. And the husband was, really great with her and she loved him and they were happy, right? And they figured it out. But that's not the case with everybody, and yes, there can also be miscommunication. That's another thing that you have to consider. Maybe you can learn each other's language more, the person should educate themselves, help, learn more English. You could learn their language, and stuff like that. So you can have more understanding of the other person. And are you willing to do that? Right. So that's another pointer.
Another question that came up is, what if you find out that he or she married you for papers after you thought it was for love, and now you are halfway through the paperwork? Is there anything you can do at this point?
Okay, so I've had these cases happen before where the person becomes extremely vindictive and then they okay, so this is the options you have, right? Communicate with the person and be like, hey, because sometimes people change their mind, maybe the person did come into it initially saying, I'm going to marry this person for papers, but then they fell in love with you, right? I mean, because marriage in general, whether it's with papers or not, many people go into marriage for some kind of benefit. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, why are you going to go with this other person unless you feel like there's going to be a benefit they're going to give to you, right? Well, what is that benefit? Okay, the number one benefit, what? You're going to have a physical relationship with this person. Is that not a benefit? It is, right? You may have a financial benefit from this relationship, right? Because two incomes maybe are stronger than one, right? So you could have a financial benefit of the relationship, stability, protection. Everybody goes into a marriage for a reason, okay? For a benefit. And if you say that that's not the case, that is a lie. That is a lie. You're lying to yourself, okay? Because yes, maybe there's love, okay? Even love is a benefit, right? Even love is a benefit. So when you go into a relationship, and even immigration says that, there was a case where there was a man, okay, and he was disabled and he married this woman and he said, look, if you take care of me for the rest of my life and you help me and love me and you do, I will give you your papers. And she said, yes, I will do that. I will do that. I will take care of you. And she did. She took care of him like as the best that she could do. She loved him. Okay. But the immigration at first thought that this was not a legitimate marriage, but the judge said, no, marriage is about a benefit of mutual parties. He benefited from her taking care of him and she benefited from him getting the paperwork. This is a marriage. Okay. So that's legally. All right. So culturally, just practically, socially, you get a benefit. So maybe initially talk to her or him, is this what happened? And then you guys have to figure out, are you guys going to continue? Is the marriage really legitimate or not? Or they find out that it's not, and the person really wants to leave. Okay. Well, you have to make the decision. Do you continue with that application, right? Mutually together or not, or you stop it and you say, get out of my house. I'm not going to do it. Because I've had that too. I've had a woman, she spoke to me and she said, he did it just for the papers. He told me that just help him out and just let's finish it. And, and I just don't want to. I don't want to. I feel like he tricked me and I'm mad and I'm not going to do it. I'm not. And I don't care. Okay. So you can it's up to you. I mean, the thing is, as long as you guys are legally continue to be married, okay, you can continue the paperwork. I mean, you guys are legally married and you guys, the marriage, you feel it was valid. Okay. That's a question of, that you have to decide. If you feel that the marriage wasn't valid and you cannot continue, then you cannot continue because that marriage is not valid. And so you need to notify immigration of that.
And does that present something negative for that other person? Do they send them back to their country because of it, or would they have to
Well, what
apply for a different
happens is,
process?
so it depends on where you're at with the process. Okay, so if you're at the beginning of the process, the person didn't get their green card or the temporary green card, well, what happens is that case is done. They're done. So when they're here illegally if they decide to stay. They can marry somebody else, perhaps, in the future, depending on their situation. But most of the time when that case is withdrawn, it is negative. It has a negative impact on the other person because they are no longer legal. They will no longer have a pending green card or work permit, and they are here illegally. And if the government decided, they could place them in removal proceedings, and they have really no other recourse except in situations of abuse, neglect, violence, right? So there is a law, and that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize, because I had a client, she called me she said her husband, she got married. Okay. Her husband brought her and her child here to the United States, kept them as basically slaves inside their home for 3 years. Okay. Then took her out of the country and just dropped her off and left her in another country and took her papers, and she couldn't come back. She's still married to him. Okay. Is there recourse for her for that? Yes, she was abused. She could apply for a green card under her own application as an abused spouse. And this goes for men and women. Okay. So like I said, in the situation of the person being exploited to work, and let's say, they say, I'm not going to do your paperwork because you don't want to work for me, and they withdraw everything. Well, that person is eligible to apply for their own paperwork because they were abused. Okay. So that there are protections for foreign nationals in cases that they may have been abused or harmed or threatened, or, or that their status was used to control them. Their lack of status was used to control the relationship, and men and women both do it. I've had many wives tell their husbands, if you don't do this, I'm not going to do your paperwork for you. If you don't give me my money, I'm not going to do your paperwork for you. If you don't work, I'm not do. And it goes both ways, right? So I've had that many times happen. So the person can file their own paperwork because they've had abuse or harm or neglect or something like that. But in general, if that didn't happen and it was just the person says they just don't want to do it anymore, there usually isn't any recourse unless they already have their green card. So if they already have their green card, they can file their own petition to remove the conditions on that green card based on hardship or based on divorce.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I guess I want to point out here anyway as well is just because I know sometimes we may perceive things to be a certain way and maybe they're not that way, right? And I think always taking a step of caution is necessary, right? Because sometimes when marriage doesn't work out, we become upset, right? We can be vindictive, right? And we can say, we can kind of maybe move into that angle of, okay, well, you don't want to marry me, you don't want to be here with me, you haven't treated me, well, this hasn't worked out, I'm going to send you back home, right? Maybe they didn't come here for the visa, maybe they initially came here for, trying to really marry you, and it just really didn't work out, right? So it can be the case as well, inshallah. So kind of, really, before you take those steps, always kind of use a cool head, be calm, be collective, inshallah, think about everything, truly from a reflect and a pondering state of mind, inshallah, to assure that before you, accuse the person that, they used you, that they actually used you. Make sure that you have some proof, some evidence. We know Islamically that, it's not easy for us to just accuse people of things, inshallah, but then we do have bad people who do bad things. Alhamdulillah, we try to take advantage. So, alhamdulillah, just kind of being careful, because Allah, he tells us in the Quran, he loves justice, right? That he loves for us to be among the just. Alhamdulillah. So, we have to make sure that we're always implementing and applying that justice so that we're not wronging and oppressing anybody in the eyes of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, right? Because then it's, maybe they didn't do us wrong, but then now we've wronged them. And now we're held accountable by Allah for wronging them, inshallah ta'ala. So, kind of be careful with that, inshallah ta'ala. There's another question here. It says, one person is asking, how do we go about finding a person? I don't do the dating sites. I don't think they would work for me. Personally, the way you find somebody, honestly, is being part of a masjid, right? Being part of a community, inshallah ta'ala. If you're not going to do the whole dating websites or whatever, meeting people websites, the halal, I want to say the halal, I don't like the word dating websites, right? But the halal websites that are allowing you to find the spouse and meet the spouse, and they, mashallah, have creative ways of doing that for you, being part of a community. And when you're part of a community, alhamdulillah, you get to know the people in the community. You get to know the families, you get to know who's married, who's not, inshallah ta'ala. And when you find out who's married, who's not, then you find someone who, mashallah, may be of interest to you, inshallah ta'ala, then approaching the father, approaching the wali, approaching the imam, and any of these methods, inshallah ta'ala, to ask, sister so-and-so, is she single, is she married, is she available, is she looking to get married? And if she is, can you, inshallah ta'ala, perhaps, help communicate that I have interest, inshallah, right? And this can be on behalf of the men or the women, right? Because the women have to also be interested and say, I'm interested in brother so-and-so, right? There's nothing wrong with that aspect. Sometimes we put things that, we try to put things on top of, the women can't do it, only the men can do it. No, the women can absolutely, if she's interested in somebody, ask as well, inshallah ta'ala, or send her wali to ask, right? Or send the imam to ask, inshallah ta'ala, on her behalf. For instance, us, the Waiver to Reconnect, we have an application process. We put in the application process. We take the application in, inshallah ta'ala. We generally right now haven't done much with that application process, but alhamdulillah, we're working with Suhba Institute after Ramadan, the beginning of June, end of May, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to have them come in and maybe do a 2-day workshop for us. They have a program called Singles Connect, inshallah ta'ala, where we're going to try to at least have 100 or so participants, 50 men, 50 women, and they'll be taken from that application process. Initially, those who have filled out the application process, there's a fee for it, of course, because this is something for your benefit, inshallah ta'ala. And then the first day is, they give some lectures, the rights and the responsibilities of husband and wife, what to look at, how marriage is done, probably some 5 love languages, some things that are very important to the marriage process. And then the second day, they have a kind of, I don't want to say workshop, it's kind of like an event day where they come in and they have special games that they play with everybody being like, it's almost like if you were playing Monopoly or something like this. I don't know what the games are, but they play these games together, and they do different types of, I guess, icebreakers together, where you get to see how different people interact, right? And then at that moment, inshallah ta'ala, as well, you may see a sister you may be interested in. I know one of the brothers here, he put up Half Your Deen with Baba Ali. I know Baba Ali personally. Half Your Deen is another good, I believe, site, halal. Alhamdulillah, he's taken a lot of time to make sure that, it's something done correctly, inshallah ta'ala. And he has the same concept, inshallah ta'ala. And with him, I think everybody doesn't wear name tag. They wear kind of like ID numbers. And then basically you would put into the system, I'm interested in, number 111, or I'm interested in 512, inshallah ta'ala. And then he begins to see if there's a compatibility, right? He has compatibility forms where you fill out compatibility forms and matches to see what type of personality are you, type A, type B, so that all of these different things, alhamdulillah. And then I know Suhba Institute also, they do the whole premarital counseling, right? So you're going through a system of different things to help you reach a level of success in your marriage, inshallah ta'ala, and to make sure that you're marrying someone who you are compatible with. And Sister Alia, I think throughout the talk, mashallah, she's mentioned compatibility a whole lot. And I think that's something that is very important. So that's one of the ways, alhamdulillah, or one of the main ways of you being able to find a spouse. One of my sheikhs, one of the scholars, alhamdulillah, he says conferences are another way. Some people may look down upon that, right? And say, how do people go to conferences to get married? Alhamdulillah, if you're looking for marriage, that's one of the best places. You go to a mass Ikna conference, alhamdulillah, and you got 10,000, 20,000 people there, alhamdulillah, you have a good chance of finding your next spouse, inshallah ta'ala. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And there's nothing wrong with looking at the opposite gender if you have that intention of marrying them, right? I have the intention of maybe I may be interested in this person, not just to be gawking at women or men alike, inshallah ta'ala, but you are literally or seriously interested in moving forward, to take your life to the next step of marriage, inshallah ta'ala. And there's nothing wrong with that. And most scholars say that is perfectly okay, inshallah ta'ala. And then they also debate on the whole issue of, when you go to these conferences, can I look good? Can I get hooked up? Can I put on my best of the best? And they say, absolutely, especially if you're single, that you can do that. because again, I'm looking to get married, but always making sure that you take the halal steps, inshallah ta'ala. If you do see somebody again, ask for the wali. You know what I mean? Ask for the wali, inshallah ta'ala, get that information. Don't just converse with that person. Okay, let's go to Starbucks and let's go ahead and sit down and talk to one another, right? Because we see that when you start off wrong, you end wrong, inshallah ta'ala. When you start off correctly, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala will always help you to, mashallah, finish correctly, inshallah ta'ala. I'm not sure if Sister Alia has any other ways that, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, because there is technology, but I'm sure that especially, now, especially because of COVID, people weren't as much connected, like, with the Muslim community as before. But, personally, I have a lot of online communities that I'm connected with, that I get a lot of great information from and support. If you have those communities, ask them. My daughter is looking to get married, and I asked the group, and I got a bunch of people saying, yes, my son is available. Reach out to your groups. If you have like local groups that you're a part of, or they have like, I think there's for Muslim women, there's like Muslim Women United, there's like Latino Muslims, there's Muslims of America, or whatever, put yourself out there. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And saying, hey, I'm interested in getting married. You don't have to put your name. You can put an anonymous post. They have anonymous posts if you're concerned about putting your name out there. But I think it's like putting yourself out there and saying, hey, I'm interested in getting married. I mean, nobody's going to know you're interested unless you're putting yourself out there. It's not like just like, hey, I'm single. You're going to find somebody at the gas station. Like, no, you have to, if you're looking for a certain type of person, then put yourselves out there in those communities. And then also asking people around you, asking your friends, asking, other people that is there anyone who's interested in marrying, but the other point I'm going to say though, too, is be open-minded, because I think a lot of times everyone has these lists, right? They're like, I have the list, these are the things I have to have, right? Of course, there's certain things that are important. Okay. If you are a religious person and you want a religious person, then, that should be on your list, right? You're not going to get a person who's like, drink at the bar, you know what I mean? Like, it's not going to work, but, there's certain things that are your musts. And then everything else is is possible. I think I think one thing that a lot of women do, unfortunately, is they're so strict on their things that they have to have. So they fail to open themselves up to men who may be great husbands, but they're like, oh, well, they don't have enough money, or their education isn't as good, or whatever, right? I think that you can, if you're always looking for that person who's already perfect, well, you're not going to find that. You guys should come to the mentality that you will work together and get to that place. Okay. Because maybe, your future husband is not really wealthy, but he's super smart. And he has a lot of potential, and he can push you to do more. Maybe you have the skills, he has the ability, and together you guys can do things, right? And I think when you allow yourself that ideology, you can grow together better, and you will just become a better couple. And I think that men and women both, and also men also too, should consider, because there's a lot of women out there who may have been married before, okay, and suddenly they're off the market, like, ugh, we're not interested in those ladies anymore. You know what I mean? Like, even men who've been married themselves before, or men who dated and had relationships with women before. No, we don't want the girl that was married before. Maybe she has a kid or something. Like, I don't want to deal with that garbage, right? But even the Prophet Muhammad SAW, he married women who had been married before. I mean, his first wife, who was the love of his life, was Khadija, and she was older than him, and she was married before. Correct. But what did she do? She was in a really good position, and she put him in a better position, right? So, sometimes you should consider that maybe your ideal isn't really your ideal, or your ideal isn't really what you need. So I think that people need to keep themselves open to situations that they may not have thought were good for them, but they did turn out to be good for them.
Yeah. And I think that you, alhamdulillah, when you're looking for the perfect person, you always have to ask yourself, am I that perfect person as well?
Yeah.
The reality is that none of us are perfect. Alhamdulillah, we all have flaws. Alhamdulillah, there are going to be things we like and things we dislike about each other, inshallah ta'ala. But marriage is that sacrifice where, alhamdulillah, as Allah taught us in the Quran and the Prophet taught us, you are going to find much more good than you will bad. Look at the good, inshallah ta'ala, and then try to figure out how to work through the bad, inshallah ta'ala, right? You always have that pros and cons list, inshallah ta'ala, and the pros usually are much more than the cons. And you figure out how to deal with the cons once you're married and stuff like that, inshallah. There's two more questions, inshallah, here, because I know we're running close to time. Is it possible to do an overseas background check? And then the second one was, if a person shows you their passport showing they received a U.S. citizenship, is there a way to kind of verify that that is authentic?
So they're showing you that they're a U.S. citizen. So, I mean, if they have a passport, usually it's not fake. I mean, it's hard to fake a US passport. It's not easy to get. If they're in the United States with that passport, that's kind of hard to get. I mean, yes, there are some people who can get fake passports, but there's certain things you can look on it and see that it's fake. You can even take that image and upload it sometimes, and it could point out certain things, or you can compare it to an actual passport. And if you see there's certain things in it that are fake, you know, that, but it's not easy. But a background check, you could ask them if they'd be interested, you know, in allowing you to do a background check. I know that there are some services that you can pay for and put a person's name and information in, and they will do a background check for them. So yes, that's possible. But I will tell you that if you do a green card application or any type of application, they do extremely thorough background check. They check everything. They check their social media. They check their family history. They might even go visit their family. So it's an intense background check that they do. So you know that if the person passed that check, that they have no serious criminal issues if they did pass that check. So they do pretty serious background check. And the other thing I was going to say, though, is if you're looking to get married, sometimes you might talk to your local immigration attorney, because we have a lot of immigrants looking to get married. But yeah, so I mean, I know that if a person's overseas, it's hard to kind of 100% know, but I will say this from personal experience. Like when I was getting married, I had my family really involved. My entire family went to go see my husband's family. We all went, all of us. My dad went, my mom went, my sister went, we all went. And so it was, you know, already from the beginning, it showed my husband that we were serious and that I had people backing me up, that he couldn't just do whatever he felt like doing. You know, and that really matters, because you can, you know, spending a week or two with some people can help you figure out how they are, especially if you're going to travel around with them a little bit in the country, because Allah said one of the ways to know a person is to travel with them, right? So that might be a good idea, is if you go there and you travel and see how they are, maybe you guys travel from one place to the other around, you know, see the parents, you're going to get to know them a little bit better, because they can only hide so much, you know, during a 2-week long trip or a week-long trip.
MashaAllah. The final question, inshallah ta'ala, alhamdulillah, we hear your son in the background wanting his mom.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. If I understand, what the sister says here is, if I understand correctly, there is also an interview process with the embassy for married couples. Correct. Okay.
Yeah. So when you, and this goes for fiance visa as well as marriage application. So the person has to go to the embassy and they're interviewed. If the embassy officer feels there's something off there, they may deny the application. I had an application, you know, I mean, this sister, God bless her heart, she really, you know, the officer felt something was off, but she wanted her husband here and she did everything to get him. And then what happened when he got here?
It was off.
Disappeared. He dipped.
Wow.
So sometimes the officers know the situation more than you, right? And she trusted him and she was like, no, and they were married for a long time. She visited him, he knew her family, everything. But the officer wasn't feeling it and kept denying him. And she kept pushing it. And then they approved it. And the officer proved herself right. Because when he got here, he was with her for a short time and then he left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Alhamdulillah. Tayyib, inshallah ta'ala. So we're going to end it there, alhamdulillah, because we promised Sister Alia we would have her out of here by 1 o'clock, alhamdulillah, mashallah. Some important points that I kind of took away, alhamdulillah, I try to put some notes in there for you guys as well in the chat. Fiance versus a marriage, right? Inshallah ta'ala, applications had to be with the person 6 months prior. You have to be ready to financially support the person, right? When they come, because they're not going to have the ability to work, inshallah ta'ala. Compatibility is an issue. And it's something that immigration also looks at, inshallah ta'ala. And also the issue of maybe having to sponsor their families, inshallah ta'ala. So those were kind of, the 4 or 5 key points that I kind of pointed out, inshallah ta'ala, within the talk. The talk will go up on YouTube, inshallah ta'ala, our Master New York YouTube page for you guys to share, kind of go back, revisit. Sister Alia, if you want to share your information, inshallah ta'ala, give us any closing remarks, how people can contact you to benefit from your services as well, inshallah ta'ala. The floor is yours.
Yes, sure. I mean, this is a topic that's close to my heart. I love helping people with, their happy ending. I'm always willing and available to talk to anyone, whether you're interested in the process in the beginning and you're not sure what you want to do. I'm happy to have a consultation with you, or whether you're in the negative point and you're not sure where to go with that. I'm happy to speak with you and have a consultation as well. You can call me at my office, which is, my office is in Fairfax, but we work all over the United States as well as we do international cases. You can call me at 703-828-7811, which is my personal cell. You can send me a text message or you can call that number. During the day, typically we'll go to the office. You can also call my office, which is 703-546-8532. You can also reach me by email, which is my first name, which is Alia, ALIA, @AmericanImmigrationPLLC.com, like Paul, Larry, Charlie.com. You can email me there and I'd be happy to respond to you. You can also catch me on Facebook. My Facebook is Abogada Alia. You can contact me on Facebook as well as Instagram. I'm always responding to everybody. I try to respond to everyone. If you message me on Facebook or Instagram, I could keep talking about it forever. I love helping people with this topic. And I just, I want everyone to be happy and have their happy ending. It's not, for me, it's not just about the paperwork or doing your immigration process. It's about the whole thing and building relationships with my clients. So.
Jazakallah khair again, Sister Alia, alhamdulillah, for giving us your time. Alhamdulillah, thank your family for us as well, mashallah, for sparing some time for us as well. And inshallah ta'ala, we look forward to, mashallah, having more dialogue like this, inshallah ta'ala, in the near future. Alhamdulillah, we'll keep referring people back to you, inshallah ta'ala.
Thank you, brother.
With that, inshallah, brothers and sisters, may Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And may Allah allow you to find that which you look for, inshallah ta'ala, and to find the happiness that you seek. Ameen.
I mean, thank you, brother. Thank you, Imam.
You're welcome. You're welcome.